So here's something that you don't hear every day. I'm so glad I had to get my car serviced a couple months ago. Because if I didn't, I'd be giving you a completely different talk about my last 7,200 hours here on American soil. A couple months ago, I needed to get my car serviced, so I went to this mom and pop auto repair store in downtown Encinitas. I gave it to the mechanic, and I asked him how long the whole process would take, in which he responded, roughly about 2 hours. I thought to myself at that point, okay, great. What could I do at downtown Encinitas for 2 hours? Maybe I could go to a coffee shop and go get myself a cup of coffee and people watch. Maybe I could go explore downtown a little bit more, considering how rarely I go down there. But instead, I decided to do one of the most Encinitian things possible, and that is go to the beach. So I was walking down the 101, and I found a beach to my right, and I found a bench, and I sat on that bench and just observed my surroundings. I saw the lush green palm trees around me, a clear blue sky right above me, and pristine blue water right in front of me. And it was interesting to think that right on the other side of that ocean was where I'd previously lived. A couple minutes later, I looked to my right and I saw this heavy-set African-American man walk on the shore with his wife. They were walking in my direction and they finally sat on the bench right next to me. Several minutes later, as I'm kind of writing in my notebook, a surfer comes up from the beach. He approaches the gentleman right next to me, shakes his hand, and he says, "Thank you for your service," and then walks away. As that gentleman sitting right next to me looks in my direction, I notice that he's wearing a hat that says Vietnam War Veteran written on it. And at that point, I thought to myself, you know what? If I could interview this man for my TED Talk, I would have such an amazing testimony. And so his wife got up and went to use the bathroom, and that's when I got up off my bench to go talk to him. And I said, "Excuse me, sir. I couldn't help but notice that your conversation with that gentleman earlier. I'm doing a TED Talk in April, and I was wondering if I could get your opinion on my topic of what it means to be an American, considering how you're a veteran who has fought and was willing to die for our country. Just a few simple questions. It wouldn't take more than 10 minutes of your time." So skeptical at first, he finally said, "Sit down." And so I sat down right next to him, and I shook his hand, and I said my name was Matthew, in which he replied his name was Lou. Later, Lou asked me, "So what are you really talking about?" And I said, "Well, my perspective of what does it mean to be an American from a third culture kid perspective." Now, some of you in the audience right now might be thinking, well, what is a third culture kid? Well, a third culture kid, defined by James B. Gould, the author of the academic journal, The Third Culture Kid Experience, is one that spends a significant part of their developmental years outside their parents' culture. For us third culture kids, we gain a knowledge of various cultures, not only through the country in which our parents are from, but the country in which our passport tells us we're from, and also the country in which we live in. Take my case as an example. I guess you could say I have quite a bit of an identity crisis. My father was born and raised in London, England, hence why whenever I go there, this is how I sound like. My mother was born and raised in Massachusetts, and for the last 17 years, I was born and raised in Singapore with 8 months living in China. My grandparents currently live there today, and so I guess you could say I'm American, Chinese, British, and Singaporean. After telling Lou my story, he said, "You know what? You were just about to interview me on what does it mean to be an American from a veteran's perspective, but you're an individual who's just moved to this country. What does it mean to be an American to you?" And so I thought long and hard about that, and I said, you know, growing up overseas in Asia, when people asked me, "Where are you from?" I usually said I was an American. And when they asked me, "Where exactly are you from in America?" I'd said I was from Boston, Massachusetts, because that's where my mother is from, and that's where a majority of her family is today. And while living overseas, I associated America with all the stereotypes that revolved around it. Because media is one of America's biggest exports, what I associated America with through its movies, I associated America through what it was displayed through its movies, TV shows, and even its music. You know, it was the land of the free, the home of the brave. It was the leading country in tomorrow's world. Being an American was synonymous to success, wealth, prosperity, fortune. I remember growing up as a kid, I loved watching the NFL, the MLB, and the NBA. Matter of fact, I spent late nights just staying up and watching the New England Patriots play in the Super Bowl. I even spent time in Singapore playing football, basketball, baseball, instead of your conventional soccer, because I felt like American sports made me more relatable to my American family. And so despite living 9,000 miles away from American soil, I fell in love with this country, compelled that one day I'd have to move to this country in order to truly call myself an American. And so after Lou heard my story on that, he said, all right, well, now that you live here, what's changed? Is your perception of America still the same? Is it different? So I thought long and hard again, and then I finally said to him, have you ever heard of the story, Plato's Allegory of the Cave? It's a story where prisoners are chained in the cave since birth, and all they know is a wall right in front of them that occasionally casts shadows. One day, one of the prisoners is set free and realizes that the shadows on the wall are really just objects blocking light from hitting that wall. He reaches the surface where he realizes that there's more to the world than just shadows on a cave. For me, my perception of America was very much the shadows on that wall. You see, when I first got to the U.S. in Carlsbad, California, it didn't take me long to realize that I was the only Asian in a very Caucasian neighborhood. I literally felt out of place. I remember going to school, trying to adjust to this new culture and this new lifestyle, and finding it very difficult. I receive frequently the question, oh, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Boston. Oh, that's cool. But where are you really from? I remember even receiving racist comments such as, how can you see the whole world if your eyes are only half open? And so far, the highlight of my 10 months being here has got to be my experience at the supermarket. You see, when I went to the frozen section at my local supermarket, there was a guy on the other end of the aisle that had 2 frozen boxes with him. And he came up to me and he said, excuse me, sir, from your authentic palate, who do you think makes better Chinese food? Or better orange chicken, sorry. And he said, Panda Express or P.F. Chang's. And for the record, for all of you out there in the audience, orange chicken is not authentic Chinese food. I agree that it tastes good, but it's still not authentic Chinese food. And so if it's anything that I learned from the last 10 months is that not only did I not seem American to the eyes of others who were born and raised in this country, but I no longer felt American. And so Lou later leaned back on that bench, and he looked far out, right where the ocean touched the sky. And he said, you know what? Growing up in America wasn't great for me either. You see, Lou grew up in what he referred to as the deep red America, right in the heart of Louisiana on a farm. There weren't any grocery stores nearby, so whatever they grew, he ate. There weren't any tractors, so all the farming was done with his bare hands and with a mule. And he told me that he grew up in a time where it was common for someone like him to be seated at the back of the bus. He grew up in a time where it was common for someone like him to get shot on their way to the diner. He grew up in a time where it was common for someone like him to be regarded as a second-class citizen. But there was a certain drive in Lou that made him want to prove people wrong, that he wasn't just a second-class citizen. So he enlisted in the Marine Corps, spent 10 years in the Marine Corps, 2 tours in Vietnam, and was stationed in London at the U.S. Embassy at one point, where he said, quote, I did not know that there were so many different races and cultures out there, end quote. He was later stationed in Camp Pendleton, where he decided to retire and stay in the San Diego area, where he worked at SDG&E. And he worked at the very bottom, earning minimum wage, to 28 years later, working at the managerial position. Nowadays, he's retired, living content with his life, with his wife, and owns several properties at the San Diego area. At the end of his whole story, he pointed at me and he said, you are no better than me, and I am no better than you. In this country that we live in, we are all granted an equal opportunity to survive and thrive. The question is, what do you want to achieve, and how badly do you want to achieve it? And so if it's anything that I learned from Lou that afternoon, it was that being an American wasn't just the passport that I had, despite never living in this country ever before. It wasn't even the accent that I spoke with or the stereotypes that revolved around it. Being an American is really the values in which we all live and share. The idea that even as a third culture kid, I have the opportunity, just as like everyone else in this audience, to reach my goals and reach my American dream. And so that's what it means to me to be an American. Now, Lou was more than just a Vietnam veteran to me. Lou is a living embodiment of the American dream. Someone who's started from the very bottom, working on a farm in Louisiana, to now owning several properties in the San Diego area. And so the question I want to leave with you today is, have you found your inner Lou, and how determined are you to get there? Thank you.